You know the stories. Creation, Adam and Eve, Noah's Ark. They're probably some of the most famous stories in the world. For a lot of people, they're the bedrock of faith. For others, they're just myths, allegories, maybe some kind of ancient fiction. But what if there's another way to read them? A way that's been hiding in plain sight?
So let's start with this question, because it's at the heart of everything we're about to explore. It's asking us to do something really hard, to hit the reset button, to try and set aside thousands of years of translations, interpretations, all the cultural baggage we have, and just look at the text on its own terms.
You know, in getting ready for this, I came across this incredible new analysis that does exactly that. It brings together history, linguistics, and even modern science, not to try and disprove Genesis, but to do a really rigorous, really literal reading of what the original text actually says. And the conclusions? Well, they're pretty mind-blowing.
Okay, so first up, a new analytical lens, the methodology. Before we get into the really juicy stuff, we have to understand the tools being used here. This is the engine that drives every single discovery in the study, and it's what makes this whole thing so different. The real power of this analysis comes from a few strict rules. First, it's a-religious, so no faith is required, we're just looking at the text itself. It's also super literal, looking at things like scientific feasibility and whether the story is consistent with itself, and maybe most important is this last one, exegesis. It's a fancy word, but it just means using the Bible to explain, well, the Bible, letting the text define its own terms.
Now, this idea of scriptio continua, this is what opens the door to a whole new understanding. Think about this. The original Hebrew scrolls were just a continuous stream of consonants. No vowels, no periods, no paragraphs. Everything we see today, the punctuation, the chapter and verse numbers, all of that was added centuries later. And every one of those additions was an act of interpretation, meaning we've been reading the text through a filter of very old assumptions.
All right, section 2, the beginning re-examined, creation. So with that new framework in mind, let's put it to the test on the very first story. And this is where we see the first huge departure from the way we usually think about it.
So, the traditional view is pretty straightforward. God created the world in 6 24-hour calendar days. But this analysis points out that the Hebrew word yom doesn't just mean day. It can also mean a specific period of time, like an era. So what if Genesis 1 isn't a weekly planner? What if it's describing a sequence of 7 distinct eras where new things emerged? And it goes deeper. That famous phrase, "and there was evening and there was morning," well, it might not be about timekeeping at all. The Hebrew root for evening can also mean mixed, and the root for morning can mean to inspect. So each era could be a process. A new mixture of creation comes into being, and then is inspected and established. A totally different rhythm.
The story begins with darkness on the surface of the deep. I mean, for an ancient audience, that's a perfect way to describe a formless, intangible nothingness, right? It's like this sea of pure potential, just waiting for the first creative spark.
And what is that first spark? Let there be light. This is where things get kind of wild. Because in modern cosmology, the first observable moment in the universe's history is the photon epoch, the first emission of light. We can literally still see the afterglow of it today as the cosmic microwave background. The parallel is just stunning. So you end up with this rhythm in Genesis, a sudden burst of creative activity followed by a period of stability. And the study calls this an inconvenient parallel to the scientific theory of punctuated equilibrium, the idea that evolution happens in short, rapid bursts rather than a slow, steady crawl. It's an uncanny echo across thousands of years.
Okay, on to the next section, Adam and early humanity, a new origin. And if you thought the creation story was a shakeup, you might want to buckle up for this one, because this analysis delivers one of its most startling ideas right here.
All right, I'm just going to say it. According to this literal analysis, Adam was not the first human being. The creation of mankind that's described in Genesis chapter 1 and the story of the individual man named Adam in chapter 2, they're presented as two totally separate events.
And the proof is right there in the original Hebrew verbs. 3 completely different words are used. First, mankind is bara, or designed, a brand new creation. But then Adam is yashar, or formed, like a potter working with existing clay. And then Eve is ben, or built, like assembling something from existing components. Different words for, the study argues, completely different action.
And the implication here is massive. It solves that age-old question, where did Cain get his wife? Well, if Adam's family existed among other communities of humans who were already there, his kids just married them.
Suddenly, Adam's story isn't about the origin of all humanity, it's about a specific lineage chosen for a specific purpose. Okay, from the story of that first chosen lineage, we move to the story of the flood. So Noah and the flood, a new scope. And once again, when we apply this literal, contextual lens, the scale and the whole purpose of the event changes dramatically. The picture in our heads is a global flood, covering every mountain on Earth. But this analysis argues the text itself actually points to something different. A massive, civilization-ending, but ultimately regional flood. And you know what? That actually fits way better with the geological and archaeological evidence we have. But hold on, that raises a pretty big question, right? If the flood was regional, and there were other animals all over the rest of the world, why bother building an ark? The goal couldn't have been to save species from total extinction. So what was the real point?
The answer this study offers is actually kind of beautiful. The ark wasn't an exercise in global species conservation, it was an act of personal preservation. The animals on board were the specific descendants of the creatures from the Garden of Eden, the ones God had a direct relationship with. It was about saving a specific, cherished lineage.
And here's one last wild detail. If you go through the flood story and meticulously add up every single time marker, from the day the rain starts to the day Noah gets off the ark, the grand total comes out to exactly 1 solar year. For a text written thousands of years ago, that kind of precision is pretty incredible. This quote from Nobel Prize winner Charles Townes really gets to the heart of this whole analysis. It's not about trying to pit science and religion against each other. It's about seeing how, when you look at both with real honesty, you find these profound and unexpected places where they rhyme. Ultimately, what this framework gives us is a path to read these ancient stories that doesn't force us to check our brains at the door. By taking the text more literally and in its original context, what emerges is a story that's more logical, more internally consistent, and way more scientifically feasible than most of us ever thought possible.
Now look, this has been a super quick overview, just scratching the surface. In the following videos, we will explore each section of the study, everything that had the breath of the spirit of life, in greater detail.